Hi everybody, this is Fred Flintstone. Intelligent Ape is a podcast focused on discussions that are more analytical and extensive in nature. Our focus is to deliver insights, facts, and hopefully some new experiences. Yesterday we had a conversation on the global energy industry. The title of it was Global Energy Economics and Geopolitics. It ran over 3 hours, so I thought I'd do an executive summary version and try and get this in within 3 or 4 minutes. The conversation was with Manuel Asali, who is a global energy economist, strategist, and chemical engineer. Key topics we discussed were supply-demand mismatches, as well as the economics of energy. Having established that, we also got into a geopolitical discussion, which I'll summarize. Manuel started off with a indication of how he thought about global energy, demand, supply, and some of the key levers. We then talked through primary sinks of energy in terms of consumption globally. Key insight there being the key energies that were consumed, the insight being their hydrocarbons obviously are significant. We then talked about the uses of energy, and you can see production, power generation, and essentially heating is significant, and a lot of the focus on transportation, although important, it may not be as material as we thought, and that frankly, unless we made drastic structural changes to the nature of our civilization, this chart is only to grow at sort of 1 to 2% a year, and therefore hydrocarbons are here to stay. We then talked about where those hydrocarbons come from. We looked at the gas picture, which I found actually quite shocking, but you can go into more detail there. But you can see the Middle East is still significant, and Russia, of course, is very important. We also looked at oil reserves, again, same picture, and lo and behold, Venezuela becomes critical as well, although we had a conversation about how the quality and the nature of the hydrocarbons differs by market. We also talked about coal, and then we talked about how much production is left, and so this is the oil view, and you can see the Middle East has over 100 years production left, so does the CIS. We also had the same conversation for gas, and the picture is actually quite remarkable. And actually one of the key takeaways from the conversation was that whereas the 20th century was a pivot from coal to oil, our next century will be a pivot from oil to gas and maybe renewables. So that was a big surprise for me, that renewables is a and as well as opposed to a kind of singular focus. We looked at the oil supply chain, where it comes from, where it goes to, which is very, very interesting and teed up a lot of the geopolitical discussion. We then talked about the gas supply chain and the distinction between liquefied versus pipelined, which also laid, I think, some good seeds for the geopolitics conversation. We talked about the qualities of oil and how that may play a part in some of the kind of political and economic dynamics, and you can go into more detail in the podcast, chapter 1, I think part 1, we go into that. We talked about the movement of price, what's been driving it, and what the sort of price sensitivity is to capacity, and some sort of basic heuristics there, and therefore the implications for marginal disruption to marginal supply. We also talked about the economics of renewables and what drives the price variation for renewables, and therefore what the prognosis for that is. We then got into a conversation about geopolitics, and we discussed a bunch of topics. One was, if you were to channel the Cheney Rumsfeld worldview, what would you think? We also talked about the USA and Saudi, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, Russia, Venezuela, India, and China. So pretty, I think, awesome conversation. That was all in part 2. Very much, I think, if you kind of get all of the data, you might want to skip to that. And then lastly, we had a good old conspiracy theorists look at maps, and we talked, let's say we pontificated quite a great deal. So that's it. I would listen to the full podcast, 2 chapters, 2 hours for the data, 1 hour for the pontification. Please subscribe, please post comments, and let me know if there are any other topics that require this kind of drill down, because I, for one, benefited a lot from the conversation, so hopefully you will too. Cheers.